Hello. Today we have a pretty short unit. Today we're going to be talking about program design for children. So I'm just going to get my PowerPoint pulled up here. Okay. So again, we'll be talking about some specific guidelines associated with kids as it relates to exercise testing, but more importantly, we'll be talking about exercise prescription for children. So again, when we think about working with kids and adolescents, it seems safe for most kids to participate in exercise training without that medical screening. So generally, we don't think it's necessary to complete that risk analysis that we've talked about previously in this class. So again, the ACSM stratification, we don't think that that's really applicable most commonly to kids. So again, we wouldn't necessarily need medical screening. Generally, the adult guidelines for standard exercise testing can apply to kids and adolescents. However, I will talk about some particular batteries of tests that are commonly used with kids, such as the FitnessGram and the Presidential Fitness Challenge. But again, we can use many of the adult guidelines in order to test children as well. Again, when we think about exercise testing protocol, we need to understand what's the purpose of this. Is it necessary or beneficial for kids to be doing this? And how does this relate to the functional capacity of that particular child? So compared to adults, the main thing that I think is really important to think about when we're working with kids is that they're psychologically immature and they might need more motivation in order to keep on task and give their best effort when we're doing exercise tests or, helping them to complete, exercise prescription. So it's important to think about those kind of motivational aspects when we're working with kids. So when we think about what's happening during acute exercise, how are children going to be different in comparison to our adults? So again, similar to what we've seen in our pregnancy unit, I'm going to kind of take us through some of these variables. Let me get my pointer out. Okay. So we're going to look at some of these variables and how they compare to adults when we look at our kids here. Right. So absolute oxygen uptake for children is going to be lower. Again, when we think about what does that mean, the absolute oxygen uptake, we're looking at how much oxygen does that individual need in order to complete a given task. Again, that's probably pretty much directly related to their size and economy of movements. So for kids, again, they're simply smaller than adults, so they're going to need less oxygen in order to do so. When we look at relative oxygen uptake, kids are actually going to be higher in that category. And the difference between relative oxygen uptake and absolute has to do with its controlling for their body weight. Okay, so when we look at relative oxygen uptake, it takes into account what their body weight is. So it might be the unit of measure for this particular variable would be mils per kilogram body weight. Okay, so we're looking at how much oxygen are they total taking in, and then divide that by what their weight is in kilograms. Again, I won't ask you to calculate this, just understand that the relative value accounts for what their body size is. And so when we account for that body size, kids are going to be higher in comparison to adults. Okay. When we look at heart rate, again, heart rate will be higher in children in comparison to adults. And then cardiac output will be lower. So again, that tells us that stroke volume must also be lower because we know that cardiac output is a product of heart rate and stroke volume. So if cardiac output is lower, but heart rate is higher, that tells us stroke volume is significantly lower. And again, if you remember back to what the definition of stroke volume is, again, we're looking at what's the amount of blood that is like squirted out in one single pump of the heart. it requires a lot of muscle mass. And again, when you look at a kid versus an adult, we can understand that adults have more muscle mass in comparison to kids. That's probably true within the cardiovascular system as well. Their hearts are simply smaller and not as muscular as someone who is an adult. So therefore, their stroke volume is going to be lower. They're not able to pump out as much per contraction in comparison to adults. Stroke volume systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure will both be lower as well. Minute ventilation will be lower. Again, minute ventilation is looking at the amount of air that they're bringing in per minute. And again, for a smaller individual, we're going to be bringing in less air. And then our respiratory exchange ratio, again, this looks at the amount of oxygen consumed in comparison to CO2 produced, and this will also be lower, okay? So to kind of review, we said absolute oxygen uptake is lower, relative is higher, heart rate is higher, cardiac output lower, stroke volume lower, blood pressures are both lower, minute ventilation lower, and RER is also lower. So again, when we think about exercise testing for kids, you know, you got to think about this from a practical standpoint. Is it necessary for a kid to do testing? You know, it certainly depends on the maturity level and you know what level that we're going to be working with. If it's a high school student or a high school, you know, athlete, then yeah, I think we can definitely do some testing for them. But again, is it necessary for 5-year-old kids to be doing fitness tests? I don't know if that's super necessary. Depends, you know, certainly on their maturity level, not necessarily on their age. Um, so again, you know, make sure the kids are familiarized with the testing protocol before we begin testing. Again, as I've already kind of mentioned, mentally and psychologically they're immature, so they may need more motivation during that exercise test in comparison to adults. So again, I mentioned at the beginning of this unit that we have both the FitnessGram and the President's Fitness Challenge that are kind of batteries of fitness tests used for kids, and those are pretty widely used in our country. So we're going to take a look at what both of those entail here. Again, nothing that you haven't seen before. So the FitnessGram test kind of breaks us up into 4 categories. It lumps muscular endurance, muscular strength into one category, but otherwise it follows the components of fitness that are standard for adults. So let's take a look at aerobic capacity. We can do a pacer test. Again, we've talked about that in strength and conditioning class. So when we think about what is a pacer test, basically they're running the length of a basketball court and each time, and then they get a short break, and then they got to run down back to the other side. And each interval gets faster and faster for that individual, and they basically stop when they can't make it by the next beep. So again, it's a progressive running test basically that can be done inside of a gym. So that's a good one to do. If it's too cold out, we don't have a space to be able to do the mile run. The mile run is probably a better test for aerobic fitness. However, you know, you think about a child and their motivation to be able to run a mile might be challenging for a lot of them. And number 2, you're going to see a lot of changes in pace. So, you know, they might start out running really fast and they're going to walk for a while and then they're going to sprint more. So again, we're kind of losing that aerobic capacity piece. So maybe the pacer test is better in that particular scenario because it provides this kind of progressive intensity for that individual. So again, those are your 2 options there. Choose one of the 2 basically based on, you know, what that individual is in terms of, you know, what you have in terms of availability of space, but also, you know, the maturity level of that particular child. Body composition, again, we can do body fat percentage via skin folds just like we would with adults. We can also use BMI as well with children. Muscular, again, we don't really break it up into muscular strength, muscular endurance with kids. When we think about, muscular strength, like doing a 1RM and things like that, maybe not super great for most kids, just simply because they don't have the technique, that they would need in order to do those exercises appropriately. So it seems like these muscular endurance, tests might be better. Okay, so we've got a curl up test. Again, that's something that you are already familiar with. Push-ups test you're also familiar with. So again, we can do as many reps as possible with either of those, mostly looking at muscular endurance. For some of those kids though, if you can only do 4 push-ups, then that is testing muscular strength. So again, we kind of lump those things together in this particular battery of tests. And then we have something known as the trunk lift, which is kind of a flexibility test. So you're going to basically like lay on your stomach and you're going to try and lift up your like your shoulders and your trunk, and we're going to see how high you can raise up. So again, it is certainly a test of your back and shoulder strength, but flexibility as well. And then lastly, I remember doing this one in middle school, the flexed arm hang or the pull-ups. So for guys, the standard is to do pull-ups, and again, it's how many can you complete. And for the ladies, you're going to hang under the bar, so you're going to lift yourself up so that your chin is above the bar, and we're going to time you and see how long you can hold yourself in that flexed arm position in order to complete that particular test. And then for flexibility, again, 2 different options: your standard sit and reach, which we could use with a sit and reach box, or we can use like a yardstick in between our legs and reaching, straight out, again, testing lower back and hamstring flexibility. You can also do the shoulder stretch, which is the same thing as that FMS shoulder mobility test. So again, I'm taking my hands and I'm putting them behind me, kind of like this, in order to see what's the distance between my hands and the back. So again, that's the shoulder stretch, same thing as that shoulder mobility test. Okay. President's Fitness Challenge is pretty darn similar, actually. Not a whole lot different here. So again, the standard test that we're going to do with the President's Fitness Challenge, again, this is used really widely in PE. We're going to do a curl up test for muscular endurance, 1 mile run or walk, and again, you can modify pace as you go. We just want you to complete the mile, and how long does it take you to do so. Sit and reach for flexibility, push-up test for muscular endurance, flexed arm hang or pull-ups depending on your gender, and then lastly BMI, so just height and weight for that one. President's Fitness Challenge has been around for a long time. I got some little statistics about it written down. It started in 1957. And the tests that they first had in the President's Fitness Challenge included pull-ups, sit-ups, broad jump, shuttle run. So again, something probably related to agility. I didn't look into exactly how the shuttle run was done back in the 1950s. A 50-yard dash, a softball throw, and a 600-yard run. So again, not really a whole lot there for aerobic fitness. Also curious, was this just for guys? Was this for young men to do and maybe not for women? I wouldn't imagine that in the 1950s that women were going to be allowed to be doing pull-ups because we weren't, maybe strong enough to do those things at that particular time. So again, the President's Fitness Challenge has been modified multiple times, and this current model here was last modified in 2013. However, I do remember doing this like when I was in middle school, and again, that was significantly before 2013. But I remember doing, curl ups. I think we did like a 12-minute run instead of this, so that might have been one of the modifications there. I remember doing sit and reach, push ups, and the flexed arm hang. Yeah, I think we did BMI as well. So maybe the only thing that was different, again, that was probably late 1990s. Yeah, would have been late 1990s when I was in middle school, was that we did 12-minute run walk versus the 1 mile. So anyway. Okay, so again, that gives us a little bit of information about kids and as it relates to fitness testing. But let's take a look at what our exercise prescriptions should involve for children. So again, I've kind of divided this up into two sections, aerobic exercise, resistance exercise. These are simply following those ACSM guidelines, which you can also find in your textbook as well. So when we look at, aerobic, they should be doing it every day, intensity moderate to vigorous, or include vigorous at least 3 days per week, greater than 60 minutes per day. Again, our kids are just extremely underactive. I think there's not many kids that are getting this 60 minutes per day. And again, when we think about PE programs being cut, or offering PE only every other day or twice a week or something along those lines, limiting recess time, again, we're decreasing the activity level of these kids. What type of exercise should they do? Anything that's enjoyable for them. So developmentally appropriate activities could be running, walking, swimming, dancing, bicycling, sports such as soccer, basketball, tennis. I will tell you that Breck gets all sorts of exercise. Like just last night, we were playing outside with bubbles. And, I would blow bubbles and he would just sprint after them. And he probably did that for a good hour. So, again, running after bubbles, how do you classify that? What type of activity is that? He seemed to enjoy it and he was having a good time. So, does that count towards this total? Absolutely. So again, I think really the emphasis when we think about what should kids be doing is whatever's enjoyable to them. The other thing to think about is just being outside, like those kids having recess. Like again, I want you to think back to when you were a child, like playing on the playground is vigorous exercise a lot of times. Playing tag, playing kickball, all those games that you played outside probably as a kid, hopscotch, jump rope, all of those things that were so fun, that's exercise. So just making sure that it doesn't have to hurt. You know what I mean? Like when we think about exercise and it's vigorous intensity, to a kid, like that's a fun game, it's hopscotch, it's jump rope, it's shooting basketball, it's whatever, So I think just exposing them to those things and then letting them decide, what is enjoyable, and then giving them access to that, giving them enough time throughout their day so that they can get that 60 minutes in. Resistance exercise, when does this start for kids? I don't know. It really depends on their maturity, as it relates to both physical and psychological or mental maturity. When do they want to start doing these things? So frequency, we can do 3 or more days per week. Keep that intensity fairly low, 8 to 15 repetitions. Again, our focus or our emphasis should be on good mechanical form. So again, doing the exercises, doing the movements appropriately, body awareness, things like that. This can be included as part of their 60 minutes of exercise per day. Again, think about some of the things that you did growing up that were probably, resistance training that we didn't really think about. A lot of the stuff on the, like monkey bars, for example, that shit's hard. As an adult, that's freaking hard to do. But as a kid, that was like fun, right? That's strength training, right? That is definitely upper body strength training. You're pulling yourself around on these bars. So, this can be included in that total 60 minutes. Again, activities can be unstructured, such as playing on playground equipment, or they could be more structured, such as lifting weights. If it is lifting weights, again, we want to keep the actual load can be low and really focus on appropriate movement mechanics. So let's get them to move correctly first. And once they've mastered that, then they can add some resistance or they can add some more weight. But really, we've got to focus on not how much weight we can lift, certainly not at this point. We really want to focus on appropriate movement mechanics. Okay. When we think about goals, like if you're working with a kid, a lot of times goals are not really addressed. So some things to think about when working with a child, and what are some goals for this particular individual. Um, Strength, endurance, again, that could be muscular endurance or aerobic endurance. The nice thing about working with kids or working with people that are not adults yet, again, You think about like my middle school, freshman and high school athletes, they're developing still. So these things just happen. Whether you're like a good coach or not, those kids are going to get stronger. Those kids are going to build their endurance just simply by doing the activities. So again, I think that those things are pretty easy to achieve as long as you're just consistently doing exercise. These things will come. Bone formation, again, super important at that particular age. Their bones are still pretty um, moldable, we could say. So again, thinking about bone formation, bone strength, weight management. Again, I just had my nutrition class watch the documentary Fed Up, and one of the statistics was looking at how childhood obesity has continued to increase and increase and increase. So again, when we think about weight management, for this particular age group, right? Getting them active, getting them consistently active is super important. Again, getting them to understand that pop every day is not good. Video games all the time is not good, right? So again, getting them active, getting them eating a little bit healthier, all those things kind of on a continuum are important components for weight management. Stress and anxiety reduction. So again, a lot of people, especially if they were overweight, are going to have definitely some anxiety when it comes to exercise. Like they don't know how, they don't want to, they don't feel comfortable in that environment. They don't feel like they fit in. Those are just standard feelings, I think, in middle school anyway. So then you add this other kind of layer where these kids can't hide, right? You're kind of exposed in this particular type of setting. So, how can we help to reduce their stress and anxiety, when they're in this setting and make everyone feel welcome and safe when exercising in kind of this judgment free zone? They should be having fun and developing this social interaction. So, again, super important that it's fun or they're not going to continue doing it. They're going to go home and play video games, right? But if you can make it fun for them, if you can enhance their social interaction and create kind of this positive environment for kids, then they're going to want to do more and more of that, whatever that is, right? And then skill development as well. So again, if I'm working with a middle school kid who wants to play soccer, right? What skills can we focus on in terms of, helping them to develop in that particular sport or just develop as an athlete in general? Skill development could be just simply moving well, right? And part of that is just doing more movement so that you feel more comfortable in your body as well. Okay. A few other special considerations to think about. It's very important that we have kids that if they are doing strength training, they're receiving proper instruction in how to do so, but also supervision as well. So we need to be making sure that we are supervising them and giving them feedback as it relates to, those movements and their mechanics and that sort of thing. Okay. Kids should also avoid hot and humid environments. Again, kids are not great at heat dissipation, just like older adults are not. So it's important that we try to avoid those, or if we are in those particular environments, let's back off the intensity. Let's make sure we're giving them plenty of water breaks, getting them into the shade, keeping them cooled down, those types of things, maybe shortening the practice or the workout, the exercise, whatever. Okay. Efforts should be made to decrease sedentary activities and increase activities that promote lifelong activity and fitness. So again, like if this kid wants to be an all-star at soccer, like great, but let's also give them the skills that they need so that they know how to exercise later in life. Again, I think that's something that's kind of challenging for a lot of our student athletes, probably not in kinesiology, but in a lot of our other sports. Football, for example, volleyball would be another example. It's hard to do that sport once you graduate. It's hard to play pickup football, every day or every couple days or whatever, right? So again, can we expose these kids to a variety of activities that could be lifelong? So, knowing that I can't do football when I'm an adult, okay, well, hey, it turns out I like riding my bike, or hey, it turns out I like the strength training portion of football training, so I could keep doing that. So again, providing them with exposure to many types of exercise will help them to develop kind of lifelong skills, so that they can maintain their fitness later in life. Again, trying to decrease sedentary activities for them. If this is your own child, right, could we limit the amount of video game time that they're spending, and try to find some better, um, you know, more active alternatives to, those leisure time activities. Okay. Overweight and physically inactive children might not be able to do that 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity per day. So again, we can start with, some lighter weight or moderate intensity exercise and gradually progress both the intensity and frequency of their exercise, right? So again, if they can only do 20 minutes of, light walking or biking or whatever it is, right? Let's build them up slowly, as it relates to, intensity and also time as well. So again, when we think about schools, so are the schools responsible for providing, exercise and providing these skills? Yeah, we'd like to think so, but yet at the same time we're cutting PE programs. It's not mandatory, or the kids are only getting it one semester or one trimester a year, and it's only every other day or something along those lines. So again, depending on the school district, we're looking at a decrease in the amount of time kids are in PE, but also, when we look at those younger grades as well, we're looking at a decrease in recess time a lot of times, because the schools are often very focused on, again, it depends on the state, depends on the district, so this isn't everybody, but they want to get those standardized test scores up so that they could get more money for the school or whatever, show that, that's their way to assess student learning. Are these kids learning what we want them to learn, and those types of things. So I put schools/practitioners. So again, maybe you are somebody who's going to work at a summer camp for kids, or you're going to be involved in after school. Maybe you're going to be coaching. So lots of other people could be role models or practitioners when we think about providing exercise opportunities for kids. So again, what do we want to do? Provide lifelong physical activities. Okay, so again, that's great. I want them to know the rules of football, and I want them to know how to play badminton and softball and those types of things. But let's also provide them with some skills for, lifelong activities that they could do on their own when they're adults. Okay, so expose them to yoga, expose them to resistance training, expose them to rollerblading, expose them to swimming for recreation. So again, exposing them to all these different types of activities is important. Meet diverse interests. Again, you know that I love running, I love biking, I love swimming. I don't love yoga, right? So again, you can't let your interests, overpower what's happening. Let's meet a diverse amount of interests. So yes, even though I freaking hate yoga and I'm never going to do it, I need to expose these kids to those types of movements so that they're familiar with those and they can decide for themselves whether or not that's something that they enjoy. Provide opportunities for all skill levels. So again, trying to create this welcoming environment for kids so that they feel comfortable, and they're all getting something out of that. And again, that can be really challenging when you have, middle school kids where you've got, 5 that play club volleyball, and then you've got 10 that have never even touched a volleyball before, right? How do you meet them both in regards to providing them with skills or helping them to get something out of that session? Again, that can be pretty darn challenging. So that's certainly a challenge, I would say. Um, I think the best thing that we can do for kids and for adults, for that matter, is help with the self-confidence, self-efficacy piece. Again, exercise is a great way to build self-efficacy and self-confidence. I think that's certainly where I got my self-confidence, is setting this goal, and then, you know, in running, it's such a numbers thing, right? Like you can physically, or you can, you know, visually see that this number got better. Okay, so I ran a 67-second 400, and then I worked really hard, and then I was able to run it in 65 seconds or whatever, right? So again, I could see that improvement. And reaching those goals allows you to build self-efficacy. So again, keeping things kind of concrete like that will help kids to be able to see improvement, and that can really help them to gain confidence as they start to see success with reaching their goals. Also skill development, and just providing them good positive feedback, like, hey, you know, that was a great swing, you didn't hit it this time, and here's some things you can work on, but again, you're doing a great job, and you're really improving from where you started 3 weeks ago or whatever. So again, focusing on those skill development is important. Again, as mentioned, overall body mechanics and just feeling good in your own body, proper technique, those things are all important that we need to kind of focus on as practitioners when working with kids. What about parents? Again, I know this is a little ways off for a lot of you, but some things to kind of think about as you continue to develop as young individuals. But parents, set a good example, be a good role model, right? If you're sitting on the couch watching TV, or, you know, they don't see you do anything physical, they're not going to have any desire to. One of the greatest things that happened this last weekend is I was getting ready to go on a run on Saturday morning, and, you know, Breck was up, we ate breakfast, and we were playing in the yard and everything, and I go and get, you know, my shorts and t-shirt on, I'm going to go run, and he's like, Mom, I want to go running with you. I'm going to go running with you today. And it was just like, yes, you know, like you know, he sees us do those things, and that's what kids do. They see what's happening, and then they're going to be interested in the thing. I hope they're going to be interested in the things that you enjoy doing, possibly. So again, be a good role model and show them how to be physically active, and then they're not going to know any different. They're not going to know that other people are, you know, sitting at home watching video games. Well, shit, my parents are out riding their bikes or running or playing in the yard, playing catch with me. So again, thinking about those things, I think, is really important as you grow. Being supportive. So again, you know, maybe your child wants to do gymnastics, and you never thought you would be a gymnastics parent, right? But be supportive. If they're interested in those things, then let them pursue that, and support them in that way. Getting involved, right? What can you do to help? Can you practice some of those things at home? So, you know, if they are playing softball and they like that, even though you freaking hate softball, can you go out and can you play catch? Can you, you know, what can you do to help them? What can you do to get involved with activity with them? Encouraging activity. So encourage them to try something new. Encourage them to get involved in that rec league, and those types of things is good, right? And then also providing transportation for them, right? So if they say they're interested in soccer, okay, well, you've got to buck up and be able to drive them there, and, you know, sacrifice your time in order to get them to those practices, or whatever it is, right? So again, I think thinking about some of those factors are important as you guys grow into the role of parents eventually. So, alrighty, that's all I have for you today as it relates to program design for kids. Again, a pretty short unit, so not too bad today. So I hope you have a great day, and we will talk soon.